Rejection, abuse, abandonment. These are all feelings that almost anyone can relate to. Our relatability to these feelings is what makes the Hillbilly so likable. A victim of abuse, finally getting revenge on his abusers is something just about anybody can get behind. Personally, I think everything about this killer is incredibly high quality. Sure, he could use a visual touch-up, sure his overheat mechanic was something nobody asked for, but everything about Max Thompson Jr. is fantastic in my eyes. His power is simple and fun. Running around with a chainsaw sounds so straightforward and like there couldn't even be much you could do with that idea. However, as anybody who's ever played Hillbilly even once knows that he is not an easy killer. When you first start playing him, you try to use your chainsaw, and you miss, every single time, because the survivors simply move left or right. This is quite frustrating. It's what my first game of Hillbilly was like, and then I immediately purchased Leatherface since I had wanted to get in some action with a chainsaw, but boy, was I wrong. While Leatherface's power is a pretty similar concept, just a guy with a chainsaw, once you know how to play him, there isn't much to improve on. Sure, there's the task of getting better and not triggering his tantrums, but Hillbilly leaves much more to learn and improve on, which is why he is my favorite character in the entire game. Learning how to curve, learning how to loop with your chainsaw, learning how his hitboxes work so you don't bump into anything, how to make the most of the perks you're being given, and how to
reverse chainsaw into Quentin hiding in a corner.
These all make for a much deeper experience than Bubba, which is pretty ironic for someone who is somewhat of a bootleg of Leatherface. However, Hillbilly's Tome story completely improved his character and showed us who Max Thompson Jr. really was. To start off, I just want to say, whoever thought of the title of his Tome story, A Man Named Boy, is absolutely brilliant. The fact that Hillbilly doesn't have a name is saddening and goes to show how demeaning Max and Evelyn Thompson are. It works so well because the title itself shows how he is seen than less than. But what makes this story even better is that it expands upon his original lore, because we already know what his parents were like, the abuse he endured, and the fact he killed them. Instead, this tome delves into the mind of the Hillbilly and how he sees the world. The story isn't about him against his parents, it's about him against the world, as is represented by the police chief that torments him throughout the story. Before this tome came out, you might think that Hillbilly is just a mindless, violent monster, but he's shown to be anything but. He's smart, retrospective, and has a basis of right and wrong. Sure, it's all been taught to him through television, but it's there nonetheless. He knows that good and loving parents don't treat their children like they do him, and knows that police are supposed to help people who need it, which only enrages him further. It's satisfying to know that his parents willingly gave him a TV to shut him up, and that doing so was their own downfall. The TV is his revelation that frees him from his chains. The unfortunate reality is, however, that just because his abusers are gone, he's still him. He's still utterly deformed, and he knows that the rest of the world will treat him just like his parents and like the police chief. It makes total sense that Max simply returns to the Thompson house, because nothing good would come of him leaving. His respective tome cosmetic is fantastic, and has a lot more meaning upon reading his story. His parents gave their prize pigs more love and attention than their own son. Hillbilly despises those pigs. He wishes he'd been one of them, thinking about how they got names and he didn't. His cosmetics are also fantastic. The variety is great, going from creepy to funny to gross. I mean, come on, who doesn't like Milkman Hillbilly?
I'm the milkman. My milk is delicious.
My personal favorite is probably his rabbit season skin. I love the dead rabbits at his hip and his facial hair. But what makes Hillbilly stand out super well, and what contributes to how iconic he is his visual and audio design. His deformity is uncanny, but also sympathetic in a way. You're scared of him, but you also feel bad for him, and you don't even have to read his lore to feel that. His skin is warped, with giant moles covering his arms. His face looks like somebody molded it with clay and slapped it to the left, leaving him in a constant expression of distress and pain. His clothes are torn apart, looking like simple hand-me-downs from his abusive father. He walks with a painful limp, which only exemplifies his deformity. His audio, specifically his breathing, showcases his disability even more. It's implied in his tome that he has a speech disorder as well, as nobody seems to understand a thing he says, which is shown when he screams in lobby. He might be saying something, but only he understands, only adding to his isolation. Not to mention, Hillbilly has some fantastic perks, and they mesh very well with what he is and isn't good at, but also work really well on just about any other killer too. Tinker takes advantage of Hillbilly's ability to insta-down from a long distance, and whenever you get use out of it on Billy, it feels fantastic. Not to mention, it's an insanely good tracking perk and one of the best killer perks in the game. Enduring is super fun to use too, and helps you out on many of the shorter loops in the game. It also lets you play in a more risky way, and survivors countering it by dropping pallets early will also be punished, as you can instantly break them with your chainsaw. And lastly, Lightborn. Is it good? Not really. Is it fun? Absolutely. To load into a lobby full of Fangs and Neos with flashlights, only to completely counter them pestering you, is an amazing feeling not many other perks evoke the feeling of. Sure, it's not a perk that you'll always get use out of, but god is it fun to use against rude survivors. Now, to talk about his add-ons. I love his add-ons, because many of them take an already high-skill killer with a lot of depth to him and add even more interesting aspects to his gameplay. Pretty much all of them are either unique and fun, helpful, or both. Of course, something like his bump duration add-ons are great for beginners and veterans alike. There's some that increase how much you can turn with the chainsaw, which can lead to some super fun shots. Then there's stuff like Mother's Helpers, which help you charge your chainsaw quicker after getting pallets done. Pairing this with enduring and not respecting pallets can make this add-on super enjoyable, functioning as a bit of a second chance and punishing unaware survivors. Then there's his engravings add-ons, which make him go even faster at the cost of taking longer for the chainsaw to charge up. This can create some super fun chases and improve his map mobility even more. The iridescent brick, which makes you have no terror radius when using your chainsaw, gives you the ability to snipe unsuspecting survivors on gens, which is quite strong and super fun. Pairing this with the Apex Muffler makes it even stronger due to the fact that it makes the chainsaw silent for those outside of his terror radius. However, my favorite add-on has to be his Low Pro Chains, which lets you continue your chainsaw sprint through pallets. It catches people off guard, can lead to interesting plays, and is incredibly fun to use. In conclusion, Hillbilly is an absolutely wonderful killer, and I love everything about him. His design, his power, his add-ons, his cosmetics, his lore, his perks are all very well done and deserve to be appreciated. Even as Mori, while dated, it's easily the most gruesome of the original 3 killers. What I'm saying is, if you've played Hillbilly and sworn him off because he was hard, give him another shot. He's really worth putting your time into.